Hi, Coach Mike Ricci here for the D3 Multisport Podcast, Trust the Process. On this week's podcast, we have strength coach Chris Lee from Boulder, Colorado. Chris is an incredible strength coach, works with many Olympians, Ironman winners, ultra runners, marathoners, you name it, he has probably worked with them if they live here. He is an incredible guy. He really knows his stuff. We talk about foundational workouts that every triathlete should be able to do. And I challenge you to try these exercises. I'd be willing to bet that you have a hard time with them. But foundationally, amazing stuff from Chris. We talk about the difference between a tendon athlete and a muscular athlete, and run a list of all different kinds of topics on strength training, how much a triathlete should be doing, and hope you can work some of these exercises into your normal routine. If you're not strength training, why not? We'll go over why you should be doing it. And hope you enjoy this. Please share it and give it a follow. Thank you. Hi, Coach Mike Ricci here with Trust the Process podcast with strength coach Chris Lee today. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, man. How are you doing?
Good. Chris is he's a big-time strength coach here in Boulder. He coaches a lot of pros, Olympians, professional triathletes. The gamut of people he trains. It would take us all day to go through all of them, I'm sure. But you walk into his gym and he's got signed this and signed that on the walls. Pretty impressive. Chris, how did you get into strength training? What was the impetus for that?
I started strength training when I was swimming in college, and I realized I wasn't really getting faster. We weren't doing anything. So then I went and worked out with the football team. I'm like, those guys are strong. I'll work out with them. Then I realized the transfer wasn't quite there to my specific sport. So I took it upon myself. I was a captain of my swim team in college and started designing our strength and conditioning program for our team, and then took that on. So studied exercise physiology and then became a strength coach.
Wow, that is amazing. I didn't know that story. That's really awesome. Chris has helped me personally with my strength training. I've referred some athletes to him. He does a great job. I will say that the first time I walked into your gym and you said to me, I'm going to teach you what a hip bridge is, a real hip bridge. And I thought, well, I know how to do a hip bridge. I've been doing a hip bridge since I was 20. Great. And he puts me on the box, put my shoulders in the box, and I've got to push up from the floor, and my hamstrings given out. My glutes are nowhere to be found. And he wanted me to do 15. I think I did 8 or 9. And I'm like, Uncle, help. So he's like, all right, we got something to work on. This is great. And you got to realize with strength training, when you find those weaknesses, I get happy when I find those weaknesses because I'm like, man, I can get faster at this, right? The other one you've given me, which I love, is, when you put your knee up on the bench and you got to bring, the bottom knee up, and I forget the name of that right this second.
Love those.
Copenhagen's, right? My kids hate them, but I make them do them. And, now I can bang out 3 sets of 15 like nothing. And I've gone to extending my ankle onto the bench now and doing them. And I'm like, all right, this is getting somewhere. So where did you come up with all these creative exercises? Is it just that you've researched this stuff? I know you follow quite a few strength coaches, but give me a little bit about your philosophy and who you follow and what you like to see.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think philosophy-wise, there's some great foundational fundamental people out there that have set the stage. There's the Mike Boyles of the world. He's a great strength coach. Gray Cook is another one. Dave DeSherry when it comes to the running and everything running related. And then there's been a lot of research, and I've had some amazing mentors through the years, people that are just way too smart for their own good. But then it's a lot about trial, error, application, research, test, retest. I think that's where there's a difference between having certifications and then having the time to apply the knowledge you've gained until you've realized certain things. For me, working with so many athletes, having done hundreds and hundreds of assessments and then piecing together the data, being like, wow, everyone sucks at Copenhagen planks. We need to make sure we do these, right? So it's been a fun years and years and hundreds of pieces of assessment data to piece together and figure out what works best for endurance athletes.
I love that. I think you're right. And, same on my side, coaching endurance athletes for so long, I know the formula, right? And when I see a weak spot in somebody, I'm like, oh, they need more VO2, they need more threshold, they need more long stuff, whatever it is. I love when athletes come to me and, they've been racing and they go do a 4-hour ride and they can do a 2-hour run the next day. Like, I don't think my endurance is very good. I'm like, I don't think it's your endurance. It could be your muscular endurance. You can't hold a certain power for 4 hours, but it's certainly not your endurance, right? And it just kind of makes me chuckle that as much as we know and as much information is out there, people still don't understand like how important strength training is. And, you can apply the right things to the right people at the right times. you get that nice bump in performance, right? And I know you've worked with some Olympians, and I know there's some people that are, going to be in the Olympics this year you're working with, and these people trust you, and they know that if Chris says to do it, they'd go do it, right? And I love hearing that story of you telling me those things. So even, and just make everybody feel better, even Olympians that come in to see you have trouble with Copenhagen's. They have trouble with certain exercises.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think right?
It's the beauty in it is almost every triathlete, I don't care what the level is, 9 times out of 10, we're starting with the same exercises. Whether you're a beginner triathlete or you're going to the Olympics, during that initial assessment, I usually find really similar things, right? I think the big thing we'll talk about an Olympian or some Olympians, they just have a huge engine. Now, from a physical, right. They have speed really in an engine. But when it comes to some of these little things, we'll call them little things because they don't seem as important, but they are equally important, right? Those Copenhagen planks, we'll do a little deep dive on that real quick. We're targeting the adductor, and the adductor is a Swiss Army knife, which is really interesting, especially in TT position. That adductor gets overworked and shortened a lot, which doesn't, it's my adductor. It's not a main muscle, but it is a primary, can be a primary restrictor in hip flexion, hip extension, hip abduction, and hip adduction. So it can basically lock up your whole hip if we don't train it. So it's a funny one that you brought up Copenhagen planks. Everyone hates them, but over time you realize how important they are.
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I loved them when you first gave them to me. I mean, I hated doing them, but I knew the benefit because when I do long rides, and I can't tell you any 70.3 I've done where my adductors have not cramped at the end. And yes, it could be salt related, but I'm pretty sure I've taken care of that side of it. So I knew the muscle was fatiguing for a reason, and I can do all the side lunges I want, right? Like that wasn't the answer to it. So now that I've done the Copenhagen's, it's like, man, this is the real deal. Like I feel so much stronger doing them. Even just running, like putting my foot down and pushing off and saying, wow, I got some power there now, right? It's all coming together. For an old guy, it's kind of fun to see. There's some light at the end of the tunnel still, Yeah. So if I said to you, and I don't want to put you on the spot with this, but if I said to you, give me 3 to 5 exercises that everybody needs to get better at, what would they be in general?
Star side plank, the opposite of a Copenhagen plank. I would say deep reverse lunges or deep Bulgarian split squats.
Okay, so your foot would be up on a plate or a small
and then you have a slider in the back.
Lunge.
It's, for support.
Okay.
I would say pull-ups are actually underrated. Pull-ups in rows and dead bugs. I would just go with those, covering all the bases if I have to. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, it's funny. So as I went through your program this fall, I started making a list of the 5 or 6 things I wasn't good at. And on opposite days of lifting, I would just go in the gym for 15, 20 minutes and just do those things and get better at them. And it's amazing what happens in 3 weeks. I mean, you're like, wow, now I can do 3 sets of 15 at Copenhagen's if I do them 3 times a week, right? Do something once a week. You're probably not going to get better at it.
If you run once a week, you're not getting faster.
It's
running,
that frequent,
right? Same idea.
Not at all. Not at all. Awesome. So then tell me a little bit about, so you came out of college, you were a swimmer. Tell me how you got to be a professional triathlete. Like that's a long way to go. And, you never talked about running track or anything. So I didn't know if you had a running background.
I swam the 50 and the 100 and the 200 IM in college. And I was a sprinter. And my friend Arlen Mackesy from in Jersey, he's a Filipino national champion in triathlon. So this guy would swim with us in college. And then I'd see him go out on a 20-mile run. I'm like, this guy's psycho. He's a maniac. What is he doing? But then I was intrigued. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm doing triathlon. Like, you should try it. Like, you're fit, you're strong. I was a breaststroker as well, so you have strong legs, so you can pedal bikes. I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I signed up for a sprint, and I was like, that was cool. So being a young, 20-year-old kid, I'm like, all right, I'll do a half Ironman. Next. No training. I trained for it, but like if I had you coaching me, I would have been much, much, much better. But
right.
Yeah, so I did that and graduated from college, and I thought, it'd be a really interesting experiment to see if I can't become an elite power athlete and take that physiology and apply all my training knowledge to become an elite endurance athlete. So I was like, I can swim. I know that. I found I was decent at riding because I was strong. Running, what took me a long time. It took me.
So what do you think it was? Do you think it was just the swimmer athlete that had to go from horizontal to vertical? Was some of that? Was it just lower leg
Yeah, it
stuff, or
was a
was it just
combination
endurance, or
of
you were heavier? Like, what do you
I
think
had
the
never done that many
limiter was?
plyometrics. Like, I've never been that load bearing, so I didn't have any spring, and I just didn't know. I didn't move efficiently at the time, so it took quite a while to change things up a little bit, but it took years and years and years of. I like to think I've always trained really smart. I became the coach to others and mentor to others. I think because I didn't quite have the ability they had, but I try to uncover every piece of knowledge to try to make myself the best. And then I realized I don't got it as much as these guys do. So, but it's fun to see, okay, I can use these
I love
lessons I've
that.
learned and impart them to others and watch them take it to the top. Like, well, it worked. Okay, that was cool.
That's awesome. You know, the one thing you said that I can just tell you're a great coach, and I look for this in coaches all the time, and it's the coaches that want to experiment. And they don't always use themselves. I've used myself, you've used yourself as an experiment, but you're trying to unfurl that one little nugget. You're looking for that one nugget, that one thing that's going to get you 5 seconds a mile faster, right? And we're totally digging. And, you know, I do this all the time with my athletes. I'm like, hey, okay, so we've been doing this here, but you know what? For the next 6 weeks, we're going to do this one thing every Tuesday. Like, why are we doing this? I'm like, let's just see what happens on the other side of this. And they're like, man, I dropped like 5 seconds in the pool just doing that one drill. I'm like, yeah, right, okay. And, you know, as a coach, like that's your job. Your job is to just keep trying to uncover the important stuff, so your athletes can use it, right? And I had someone ask me the other day, I coach a master's group here a couple times a week. And one of the swimmers says, do you ever do your own workouts? And I said, I would never give someone a workout I haven't done. I said, I know. So when you're doing whatever, 4 times 50 fly at the end of the workout, like I've done it. I know it sucks. Like, let's get through it. Like I push yourself.
You mentioned that. I think
you got to set the example.
I always use the analogy of the Batman utility belt. And I feel like as coaches, Batman has something for everything in that belt somehow, right? And my goal is to acquire little nuggets, like you said, and in this moment for this athlete, I think we can use this thing. Try that out. Oh, it worked. Great. If it didn't work, let's try something else.
Right. And you know, sometimes, I mean, if you had to look at it like in terms of experience versus intuition, like you can look at somebody and you can say, okay, we're going to do these 3 things, they're going to get better, and they don't, right? And then you're like, okay, I'm going to try something completely off the wall. Let's try to do something really weird. They're going to think it's weird, but it's going to work. And you know it's going to work because your intuition tells you this guy needs this, right? Even though this isn't written in any book anywhere, like I know that I'm going to have him do this exercise and this is going to work. And like how many times has that probably happened for you, right? Like the intuition is just so much of this. Yeah, totally. Awesome. All right. So
I've raced for
you
2
became
years.
a professional triathlete. How many years did you race for?
A year and a half, really. And then I realized, it's funny,
Nice.
It was one of those moments where like, I'm trying so hard and just not really seeing that trajectory that I see around me. And there, you know, luckily I had a little injury that made me pause, and I've always wanted to go into a pure coaching role. I thought, you know, I think now is the time to transition into coaching. And, you know, I think that is, you know, you have to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are, and strength of mind was coaching more so than being an athlete.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was working with a coach.
And I think, were you working with a coach then, or you self-coached?
Back in Puerto Rico. And then for a small part, I was self-coached, but that was a disaster. Don't do that. I know all the rules, and I'll break all the rules.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of endurance athletes, triathletes.
Yeah,
I know you've worked with a lot. Have you worked with ultra marathoners too? Yeah, I know Olympic marathoners for sure, and certainly some Olympic distance Olympians, Olympic distance triathlon, ITU triathletes, right? So, you know, having raced repeatedly, fast and hard, recover and all that. So you've run the gamut of all that. Do you, and I know that with my athletes, I always try to preach them that the strength piece is really what brings it all together, right? Like it just brings everything together because you get that power, you get the strength, you know, the plyometric piece you had talked about. We can assume that everybody knows it's important, right? So if you look at it on a scale of 1 to 10 and everybody does their long bikes, their long runs, they do their interval workouts and swims and all that stuff, like how important do you put that strength training in there on a 1 to 10? And I'm not talking about aging. I'm just talking about to get faster as an athlete, right? Like how important is it to strength train?
Cardiovascular, I'll call it training, is a 10, which is an endurance 4. I would say strength is a 7.5. It's high. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and then do you say, so let's just say, I'm an endurance athlete. I come to you, I'm going to race an Olympic distance race.
So
And,
I would say the minimum effective
how many
dose
times a
there is
week do I
2
need
times a
to
week,
strength train?
right? And that's something where certain athletes, I would say, hey, we have 12 weeks. Let's do 3 times a week. And then we can back it off, go into maintenance mode a little bit, and go 2 times a week, right? And then that's lead into your taper.
Nice. Okay. Awesome. And then speaking of taper, like at what point would you back somebody off? Like, let's say somebody's doing Ironman, right? They're racing, they're 9 months of training, and they start in January, the race is September.
Totally.
Obviously they've done a couple of 70.3s in there maybe, and they're gonna do an Ironman. How far out would you back them off,
so
and what would you
strength
prescribe
taper
from the
is
time
much
they're backed
different
off until
from
race day?
cardiovascular taper, right? There's very different adaptations needed. So we also have to take into account likely 8 weeks out from that Ironman, your training probably looks pretty hard, right? Volume's high, fatigue is high. So 8 weeks out, we're already coming down a little bit, and we'll call that maintenance mode. And the goal of those sessions is I have the 3 M's here: maintain, modify, and mitigate. So we're maintaining your base strength, right? We're not pushing anything. We're modifying as needed, and then we're just trying to mitigate any injuries right now. Just let you train hard, right? So that's 8 weeks out. And then 4 weeks out, we're talking about 1 more maintain and 3 weeks of taper. And 3 weeks of taper being, this being race week here. So we have a volume decrease and a slight intensity decrease for Ironman, just as you don't need so much intensity in the gym. It's Ironman, not ITU, right? So then we're looking at a further volume and intensity decrease. Sorry, a volume decrease 2 weeks out. And then the week of, we're looking at an even bigger decrease there. So just to throw some numbers out there, we're looking like 20%, like 33% less, and then 50% less, right? But that is taking into account you've done all the base work, you've maintained, and then you can taper well. If you've only done 4 weeks strength in your life before, we're going to taper much more aggressively, right?
Yeah. So if I get to my final week and I'm doing Ironman, am I just going to the gym doing one set of 12 or one set of 15 reps? Or
the late onset muscle soreness and any more of that hypertrophic effect, which is muscle damage. So we found that the 7 rep range and under has very little soreness, right? And that 5 rep range, even less soreness. But we also don't want to go and smoke your central nervous system with weights attributed to those reps. So usually for 5 reps, you would do like 85% of your 1 rep max. It's a little bit too high for that, right? That's where we may decrease that to 75% of your 1 rep max, which is normally what you do 10 reps at, but we're doing 5, right? Because there's this concept of strength retention, then if you are doing 70% of your 1 rep max a couple times a week, maybe twice a week or so, you will still retain 95% of your peak strength, is what they found. There's so much strength there.
Wow, that's huge. So let's just take the same Ironman athlete.
Yeah, this is a great question.
They are now done with their Ironman. Their body's completely destroyed.
That have extremely high muscular damage and endocrine system.
Do you feel
dysregulation? That would be
the
Ironman,
strength and mobility,
and the marathon.
Would actually
some good
help the
research
recovery
on the marathon. And what I've found over time is that we're playing with the endocrine system more so than anything else. And so endocrine system, hormones, chemicals in your body, it takes up to a month sometimes to fully regulate everything here. So we're working after light movement. We're doing some light movement, some blood flow, and we're really trying to promote range of motion initially and changing up the movement patterns. So there's something to be said about your body recognizing, I don't want to move through this range of motion that I just did a lot of. I'm really, not doing so well here. Which when you change it up, it actually allows the brain to calm down a little bit and to promote healing because you're using other parts of your body. And that is also a little bit more fun. So it helps promote that healing process. So 2 weeks of that and then 2 weeks of reloading slowly allowing the body to build back up. And I think that's a big missing piece. Some people do nothing and they feel junky for a month of training, right? Because, yeah, of course you do. You've done a lot of that. Your body's a little fried. So change up the energy systems, change up the movement patterns, and then slowly reload so the body can slowly be like, okay, ready to accept some more training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Perfect sense. Okay, so let's go to the other side now. So we did the long distance slow twitch people, and if we have ITU people, or even age groupers that are racing a sprint every month or every twice a month or once every 3 weeks, so that's typically what sprint and Olympic athletes will do. Let's say my race season starts in June, and I'm gonna mid-June, and I'm gonna go to mid-September, so I've got a solid 3 months in there. How do I come on and off the weights? Like, am I still maintaining at 50% each week, even if it's a B race, or do I just worry about the taper and I'm just kind of training through the B and C races? Because it doesn't really matter. Although,
so
we
again,
know
I think that's where the beauty
numbers that, I don't know if you ever use the Stride Power Meter, but
that concept
there are numbers in there that talk about leg spring stiffness.
So
and you can see when people are just,
you can retain that strength. Right? So let's decrease that volume and intensity big time.
I mean, that's an easy way
after
to do
you race.
If you feel springy, or do you feel like you're
in between that, we just do a reloading session.
So how do we
get the body back,
load and
have some
unload
load
with
in the
those
system?
consecutive races over
too much.
A few months?
That's the races, right? So at no point should 5 reps with enough rest at 75% of your 1 rep max, 50% of your capacity, fatigue you too much. You do 2 sets of 5, right? Not much, but your body has these things called satellite cells, and they basically store the information of muscular contraction, which is strength, right? So they can store that strength information for a long time. I hate the term, but they say it all the time, like old man strength. But it's true. Your body remembers everything you've done, and it just takes a little bit of a reminder to turn it back up, right? For example, like those Copenhagen planks you did. Hey, I did 3 weeks of this, and boom, big increase. You're a strong guy, so it turns back on quick. Totally. Yeah. And then with taper too, B races, A races, we're always going to actually apply that same taper. We wanna triathlon's hard. You're training so hard, so long, especially that 8 weeks out, right? So we're gonna do that same protocol for ITU as we would for Ironman. We just allowing you
it's
to
amazing.
train
If
hard.
I don't do it for a week, I'll do
There's
a day
no
of them,
more
suck, and
gains
the
to
next
be
day,
made
boom,
in
we're
the
back
weight
at it.
room at that point. Our goal is just to maintain. There are gains to be made that last month in training, but I don't want to interrupt that at all.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay. So changing gears a little bit, if I'm, let's say I'm a 35-year-old triathlete versus a 45-year-old triathlete versus a 55-year-old triathlete. And let's say that functionally they move well, they can do their Copenhagens, they can do their reverse lunges, pit bridges, all that stuff. Do you look at the numbers and say, man, this guy should be able to deadlift this, or should he be able to dumbbell press X, or
so I differentiate this
hold so many pounds of dumbbell and doing a one-legged, lunge from the bench. Like, does that stuff ever cross your mind? Do you look at people like, I'm just going to throw something out there. So I know you work with a couple of guys who are 30-minute 10Ks.
Testing company.
And do you look at them and say, man, that guy can only deadlift 200 pounds. If I can get him to 250, he's going to get faster. Does that really not matter?
What we looked at, what kind of athlete are you? And that's what I found really interesting. For running specifically, cycling a little bit different, but are you a tendon athlete or are you a muscle athlete? So then there's the difference of how strong is strong enough. And this is another mentor of mine, Eric Cressy. He's a big deal in the strength world. He says, there is too strong. You don't need to be that strong. Why are you risking that much injury for a baseball player? 450-pound X-bar deadlift. You don't need to be any stronger than that. In fact, you might not even need to be that strong. How well can you jump? And how is your range of motion? And how is your control? And for a triathlon, work capacity. Can you do those 15 single leg loop bridges or those 15 Copenhagen planks? I think those fundamentals, those are what I'm looking for beyond strength. Getting stronger, I think, if you're able to work up to lifting your body weight for a couple reps, that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that, and we can continue to build on that. But I think that's where there's a beauty in working with alongside a coach, right, like yourself. Hey, Mike, what do you want this athlete to accomplish right now? Oh, okay. Maybe increasing their weight in the weight room isn't that big of a deal then. Let's focus on whatever you want. Maybe VO2 max, right? Or like, oh, maybe this is the right time to increase a little bit of load. So there's no perfect number for anyone. I think the baseline of can you do these Copenhagen planks, start side planks, single leg glute bridges, single leg calf raises, single leg squats. Can you do those things? Great. Now let's add some strength on top of that and then work with your coach to figure out what do you need to do there and when. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a female Kenyan marathoner who just got third at Boston. And I evaluate a lot of tendons, looking at strain.
That's a great answer.
I've never felt anything like this
so I know
before in my
Eric
life.
Cressy,
This tendon
followed
was
him for a
truly
long,
like a
long
spring. It
time.
would bounce my hand back
Still
out.
read his newsletter.
So there are
his
certain people
podcast.
with
He always does
extremely
really good stuff.
bouncy, strong.
Can you explain what you mean between a tendon athlete and a muscle athlete?
Muscularly based athletes, right? Where we may not have that spring, but we can produce force for a long time and a lot of it, right? So in that case, I would train your strength more. I would increase tendon athlete strength, but continue working on their strength, because we can always increase our weaknesses and work on those, but they'll never be stronger than a strength if it's a true, not a weakness, but a difference physiologically, right? So if you got crazy tendons, work on those tendons. Yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah. If you've got someone who has a high VO2 and maybe they don't have a lot of endurance, or
sure. So
not a lot of muscular endurance,
we can
you got to
talk
figure
about that
out,
in a second. But
you
to
got to
that
maintain
point,
that VO2
I did
so
want
they can
to
still access it during a race. If
piggyback off what you're saying.
like they're,
something we did learn working for that genetics company,
versus somebody who's an Ironman athlete who needs to go
your
at
genetic
80% of threshold for
is just what your ceiling is,
right? So
your tendon spring stiffness
totally different.
Can
that makes
maximally
sense.
be
Awesome.
this high.
Okay. That's all good stuff.
It doesn't mean we can't train it.
Do you want to talk about your
still
app you're
raise it. Just means maybe the ceiling is here.
We want to hold off on
not
that
here. But across the board, if we can raise all these things up a little bit, that has a compounding effect that may supersede what your genetic profile for one attribute may be, right? So back to your point of train holistically and train smart, well-rounded. The athlete with a huge VO2 but no muscular endurance, well, let's still train that, because that might give you the capacity for all these other things that might ultimately make that ceiling higher than it was with one attribute. And that the need for strength training is exponential, I would say, with age, non-linear. So as you age, it's linear, and then as you age,
so I'm
the
gonna
need
give
for
you maybe a
strength
softball
increases.
question, but
we
as
lose
let's
that
say I'm a
ligament
60-year-old
and
triathlete,
elasticity,
and
so we
I
have to
do
train
strength
it.
train a little bit.
We lose the
But
muscular
tell me how important that
pliability and
is
strength, so we have
as
to
I
train
age,
it.
and I'm
Mobility
now,
even
no
more
more,
so.
no longer
Our
am I like
bodies just
putting
aren't
muscle
as
on.
adaptable, and the
Right, I need to keep that
big
mobility
thing,
and keep that
bone
strength. And
health.
even as I age,
Right.
out of
Strength
sports, and now
training
I'm
lowers
75,
your
80.
skeletal system,
How important is
which
it to strength
allows
train
you
to
to have
just
higher
the
bone
rest of your
density.
life, right?
Right. Biggest thing in bone density, when we looked at it from a genetic lens, there's not a lot you can do other than you could eat well, sleep well, blah, blah, blah. But the only way, if you have low bone density, to increase that is through heavy loading, right? So as we age, it's more and more important. And we know we lose muscular strength as we age. So that's a huge component, right? If your engine's huge and you can't put out the force necessary, you're going to get slower, right? And then eventually to the point where you break down, which we don't want to see. It's not the same load on your body, right? So it won't have the same physical effect, and I mean muscle, tendon, skeleton, and it won't have the same chemical effect.
Do you think that, so
either.
there's a lot of women that don't want to lift heavy
some
weights,
good research around
women that I coach,
lifting heavy,
all that, and do you
just enough,
do you see
not to
that, like,
crazy destroy you,
instead of doing, let's say,
whatever
3 sets of 8 deadlift of a heavy weight,
cortisol,
what if they did something that was like 3 times 20
hard,
but they're still getting that heavy fatigue at the end? It's still not the same
there's
power,
actually
though,
more of a production
that's the part I've never been able to understand.
Building up hormones versus the breaking down hormones, right? So that's huge, and it also doesn't have a big soreness component. The more the reps, sometimes the more the muscular damage can be, not always. So it's really important to think of it as an offset. Most of endurance sport, we think of this as catabolic breaking down. It slowly wears you down. So when we think of strength, we're thinking about anabolic? Can we slowly build you back up just to create a net zero? That's at the end of the day, we can create a net zero. I consider that a huge win. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And at the end of the day, something is better than nothing, for sure. So we're all busy. We have lives.
Right. No, that's perfect. That's great. That's great.
And it's hard. It's hard to figure out what to do when.
Sense, and now I understand it a lot better. And I always think about,
sometimes
lifting heavy,
10 minutes.
Whether it's, bench press, dumbbell press, lat pull down heavy, or deadlift, which is my favorite. But it's that force, right? It's that force production of getting that first rep going. And then, you're at 5 reps, knowing you have 3 more, and you're at the aerobe, and you're like, how am I going to do this? But you do it, right? You pull through and you do it, and you walk away going, right. I just got stronger, right? That's a great feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Absolutely.
If I was smart, yes, but I really just like deadlifting. I just think it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's
feels
crazy
good,
to me.
right? Afterwards,
awesome.
I feel pretty good. Yeah.
After my runs, I typically do pull-ups and push-ups, and even if it's 5 rounds,
offset some
I got 25 pull-ups in and 50 push-ups. It takes me 5 minutes, and sometimes that's what it is. But that old man strength has to come from somewhere, Yeah. Cool. And I was going to ask you what your favorite exercise is.
You're going to make some impulsive decisions,
it's Turkish get-ups, right? Yeah. That's
sure. Yeah. So
it's such a manly thing, right?
I'll demo it for you a little bit later, but it's basically everything we've talked about.
When you do it correctly, it feels good.
I have put into a app, so it is looking at who you are, your sport, your experience. I love when people try to
start a conversation with you right after you deadlift a heavy set.
All the testosterone
for
strength training
pulsing through your body, and you're like,
specifically for endurance
conversation
sports.
Right now.
And then from there, subcategories specifically for cycling, triathlon, running, ultra running.
All right. Do you want to talk about your app a little bit?
That's it's about to be
needed. You're going to introduce us pretty soon.
And what are the most important exercises for those? So we took all these concepts and we decided that it's really hard to program strength sometimes. So we wanted to make it really easy and accessible for people. So right now we have our version launching where anyone can input their race schedule, A, B, C races, right? Their fitness profile, their personal biological profile. And based on these items, we will craft a learning workout. So every workout you do is learning with you, but it's based around getting you to the goal of your A race, B races, and C races. And part of the beauty of what we've done is we've gathered, there's a database online that I've accessed that has 50,000 lifts recorded. And based on those, we've categorized and looked at sport and body types and said, okay, for a triathlete, for example, if you're doing a squat, single leg, 7 reps, how much weight do you do? Most of the time, the answer is, I don't freaking know. So the truth is we don't really know, but we can come up with a very good estimate for you to start to at. And what the app does, it learns every set with you, and it'll automatically progress or regress you. You might say, hey, I'm feeling a little tired today. And then the weight will automatically adjust, right? And then it's learning out, right? So you see about race 30 weeks out. So we're adjusting not only the weights, and the exercises will progress with you, but in certain phases of the season, like we talked about, that 8 weeks out from a race, it'll completely change what that workout type looks like. How many sets, how many reps, how much weight. Right, so it's doing a lot of that mathematical work for you that normally you'd have to go get a calculator out, type these things in, and figure out how much weight to use. Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'll give you a little sneak peek after this, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, I remember way back when it must have been, it had to be 18 months ago. We were in your gym and you were telling me about these ideas. Figuring out. The weight people needed to lift
right now are
it's amazing that you've been able. You're a smart guy, it's amazing you've been able to pull this together.
An online endurance
launch it. It's like a baby, right?
Rolling template is what I call it.
Working with this thing for so long.
Trying to transition everyone over to this app.
Congratulations! That's really
the app individualizes for every single person. Right. So as a team, they're doing similar things.
Cool. So each individual is unique. Can you send me a couple of links for those exercises, like those 4 or 5 base exercises, and I'll put them in the show notes so people can see them?
Oh man, well Bobby over there maybe shouldn't be doing that.
I know you did some of that stuff with Brad with CU, and he totally appreciated it. And CU team had, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, they got it.
Right. That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'll make sure people can reach you if they're interested in. I know you have an online program. You got the app coming out, but also you're in person here in Boulder. You're hard to see because you're a busy guy and you're pretty popular. But we'll make sure people know how to reach you. So thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Trust the Process. If you have a question on anything related to triathlon, please send me an email at mike@d3multisport.com. We'd love to hear from you. Make it a great day.